All right, peace and love, family. So I am not exactly sure how this works. I actually just got the StreamYard package. However, I wanted to come on here because I read some very unfortunate news, something that I had found out a little while ago, and it really troubled me to wake up and read the reality of what's happening. So to give people a little bit of context, my name is Salvatore Swain, aka the Credit Shaman. I am from New Jersey. I guess my bloodline would be considered a mixture of Italian and Taino, or Puerto Rican, or Almorican, uh, aka Moroccan or Moor. So on this channel, we do a little bit about everything, right? Quantum health, law, credit and crypto, plant medicine, and a variety of other things. And today, I just wanted to make a very intentional moment to just really plug into the reality and allow people to hear actually what's been happening in the reality surrounding indigenous people, specifically here in Turtle Island. Remember, Turtle Island is the whole continent of North America. Not a lot of people actually readily, I guess you could say, acknowledge the United States as its ancestral land as it really is. However, it's time to reawaken the indigenous people in the Confederacy. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to start with the post that I read today from the Lakota people, from the Lakota Law on Instagram. Is hundreds of bodies reported found in unmarked graves at former Saskatchewan residential school. The total number of graves near the former Maryville Indian Residential School is expected to be over 3 times higher than 215 discovered in Kamloops. Says the caption here, "This makes my heart hurt, and it's not an unfamiliar pain. Indigenous people will feel it time and time again until all children are found, until these governments and churches pay for what they did." So the reason why I wanted to talk about this today is because it's brutally the sad reality of what's been happening here for, I don't know, the past 300 to 400 years, here on the land of Turtle Island, not just in North America being the United States, but North America being Canada. And if we go over to my boy Sharif Al Bey, you'll see over here how he talks about Canada's stained human rights record, the violation of Aboriginal rights. Canada implemented a residential school system for Indigenous children from 1870 to 1996, which was literally called cultural genocide by Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada in 2015. 150,000 Indigenous children had been forced to attend boarding schools. 50,000 of them had been abused to death. The remains of 215 were discovered in May at a former boarding school, including some as young as 3 years old. At the present, the penetration of the secondary education is only 70% for Aboriginals. The employment rate is less than 60% for the Aboriginals. The proportion of Aboriginal prisoners in Canada prisons is as high as 60%. Holy shit, didn't even know that. The number of Aboriginal women and girls missing or murdered between 1980 and 2015 was 12 times as many as any other Canadian group and 16 times as many as white women. Wow. Discrimination of different races. The anti-Asian criminal cases increased in 2020 by 717% in Vancouver, Ottawa 600%, Toronto 400%. Man, so and his comment was, and you sheeple really think that the US and Canada are your real government? Shaking my head. So I wanted to take this opportunity to, and I really hope this is recording. I really hope this is recording, man. However, nonetheless, I'll figure it out. Yeah. Okay. So let me put this here up because it's looking crazy. Okay. So now that we've spoken about this, I want to let you guys understand something about the Civil War. The first thing that I'm going to read is actually by my brother, Turtle Island. He posts a lot of deep information about the true Aboriginals from the land of the Americas. And he's actually Lenni Lenape. When the Lenni Lenape actually have, I don't know, 500 documented generations here in the Americas. And guess what? Knock, knock was long before Egypt, okay? Long before Egypt. The Americas have a documented history long before Egypt. 500 generations, I think, is 14,000 years. 14,000 years. Egypt happened at roughly around 5 to 7,000 years ago. So take that into consideration. So here's what he posted. Still think that the Confederate flag is racist? Learn your real history. Start doing your own research. These same historians made you turn on your forefathers' Republican Party. Whoo! So I know y'all see that there. I'm going to zoom in on that, though. But you see this, my people? These are Aboriginal Moors sitting here with the Confederate flag. Sometime back in maybe even way before the 1800s. But as you can see here down, it says this is the Confederate flag. As we see, we have the flag with the X. 1, 2, 3, 4 tribes listed here. Remember 13 colonies, right? That they taught us to be afraid of. Or I remember watching those movies in elementary school about, you know, the Civil War and the war with the Native Americans, right? Not the Aboriginals. But they would, it's so crazy because the teachers would frame the conversation as if, you know, this is the history of the United States and this is what happened. Sorry about this is what happened, and this is why the United States is such a strong country. Yeah, to the United States, right? It's such fucking bullshit, and it's sick. It's sickening. Because I'm going to show you a little bit about what I was just sharing people on Instagram. However, to take a second here to finish this thought off, the United States was actually, I don't even know if it was named that. It had many different names prior to the Union coming over for the Civil War. So just to make this clear, the Civil War was between Aboriginals and white farmers, aka the Confederacy, who wanted to bear arms and protect their land. Yes, white people and indigenous people were in fact working together for hundreds of years, okay? So it wasn't until the Union came over here, probably commissioned by the Queen of England, came over here and said, we want that land. We want that territory, actually. And so the United States Corporation came over here and inflicted massacre upon the sovereign republic states that were here in the Americas. So as we go further here, and I'll read this guy's caption, you'll see these were the Confederate States. even a little bit of Mexico. As we know, Texas was Mexico, Southern Cali was it Utah, New Mexico. Like this was all Mexico. Like this is the American continent. This is Turtle Island, my friends. So as you can see, they said it was mostly the South. This is how they frame. If you go on Wikipedia and you look up the Civil War, they try to frame it like it was only the South. The United States fought between northern and Pacific and southern states that voted to succeed in the form of the Confederate States of America, right? So I'm going to go back to here. This was the real Confederacy, and this was the Confederate flag. And a lot of people are taught to be afraid of this, but I'm going to share with you what my brother here, Turtle Island, says. He says, when Aboriginal Americans created constitutions with state citizens, aka colonists, we used to operate as one sovereign republic, as one. You thought you were Africans, but you thought you were Africans, excuse me, but our American asses were a part of the Confederate States that fought with Caucasian farmers against the Union that was backed by Britain. After the Confederate States of America lost to the Union, the sovereign republics fell and were forced under the rule of the Britannian-backed Union. After 1871 and the Naturalization Act, they slowly converted my ancestors from private Americans to public U.S. citizens and re-educated the melanated masses. So basically what he's saying is that because of the whitewashing of history and because not many people knowing their history, remember, the one who wins the war writes the history. So what he's saying here is that the Africans, the people who were taught that they're Africans here on this land, were actually Aboriginals because they got us confused. They got us confused to think that Africa is our home, so that way we don't fight for this one here. So that way we forget the massive level of genocide that occurred here on this land during the Civil War, before and after. So what he's saying here is that y'all thought y'all were Africans. Every Black person defines as an African, when in fact, a little bit of history, Juneteenth was not a Black or Negro holiday. It was an Indian holiday in Texas. Go and look it up. And the Indians, guess what? They didn't want to be classified as Negroes. They did not. They saw it as a blatant disrespect. So, but people in history who kept track of records and I guess you could say the county clerks or the birth and death certificates, all of this information was tampered with. So as an attempt to continually blur the lines of history so that people don't know where they come from. So as you can see here, these are a couple more photos that he depicted as the sovereign republics. This was May 20th, 1775. To May 20th, 1861. North Carolina Republic flag. This was the sovereign flag of North Carolina until the United States government forced it to change in 1885. Interesting. The Confederacy, the Cherokee Braves, the flag of the Confederacy, right? As you can see, this is also the Islamic flag. And the Islam is what the laws that the Aboriginals practice here in the Americas. Islam, if you look it up online, it's going to go to a religion, right? But Islam is I, self, law, and master. This is the form of law that our ancestors practiced, period. Islam. I, self, law, and master. I, from the creator of the universe, representing mother and child from hence you came, self. Each one of us is a trinity, this being the symbol of civilization, law, the length and angle and width of the cosmic energies that marked you. Am, the joining of the two trinities, male and female principles, the triune, which creates another I am, master, this being the glyph for the planet Earth, of which we are on and aspire to be master navigators upon. Islam. Yep. All right. Little history lesson for y'all. So, to continue to talk about the Civil War, and I'm going to come back to this article here because this is really sad. It's really fucking sad. It almost brought me to tears earlier, and this is why I had to get on here and live stream. So basically, what I was saying, I'm going to read to you now what I was saying in my stories is that, okay, that's what I was going to do. I want to talk about Abraham Lincoln for a second because he was the Abraham Lincoln Civil War. Abraham Lincoln Civil War. All right, and I'm going to look up emancipation definition, law. And then I'm going to look up proclamation, law definition. Probably spelled it wrong. Definitely did. All right. So this is what I was going after, right? And I'm going to bring up Abraham Lincoln's Wikipedia page. The Confederate States of America. Oops. The Civil War. Confederate States of America. All right, cool. So this is what I wanted to talk about very briefly, and then I'll come back to the 215 bodies, more than 215 bodies that were found, as we know, as a result of the boarding schools, as a result of the 150,000 indigenous people found in forced to attend boarding schools, and 50,000 of them were abused and beaten to death in Canada. Okay, so that's what happened, and we're gonna watch this video in a second. I wanted to talk about Abraham Lincoln for a second and the Emancipation Proclamation, because so many people think that because that we've been brainwashed to believe that the United States is the savior in this situation. Oh yeah, these uncivilized tribes had no idea how to run governments. Meanwhile, Abraham Lincoln is he was the one who learned from these Aboriginals. You know, him, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, all of them learned from Aboriginals to even know the law or know government in the way that I guess we do now. So, and you could even go back to the Iroquois Confederacy, which was way before, way before, right? 1722. This was upstate New York. Yeah, a lot of people don't know about this. This was the original United States of America, for people who do not know. And a lot of people don't know. A lot of people I ask people in Canada, I ask people in upstate New York, they have no idea about the Iroquois Confederacy. So this is a sorcery that's been done on our people because we don't know where we come from. We don't know that we are descendants of Aboriginals who have been here for 500, probably longer generations. The Iroquois people were known as the Longhouse people. They were the ones who were very, very popular for that. But I'm going to tell you right now, we'll come back to this eventually, but these 5 nations in the beginning were not friends. We have to begin to understand as people that war is a part of our history. It's a part of our human nature, not just human nature. It's a part of nature. So I know that people want to think that, the first of all, the Civil War, of course, it was discussed utterly bloodshed. Yes, it was a massacre. But I'm going to tell you right now, before the Civil War, there were tribes fighting with one another for millennia. And if you know anything about the Comanches and the U.S. war, it was the same thing. Comanche Wars. And we'll talk about this because the Comanches ran the middle of the United States. Nothing moved. I think in treaty, they had over 2 million acres given to them or something like that, something crazy like that. But guess how much they own now? I think less than 200,000. And this was like 1800s. No lie. Look, 1840. Cheyenne and Arapaho, the southern plains of Colorado to Kansas to Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico, and even into Mexico. The Comanches were probably one of the most skilled warriors and traders. So the reason why I bring this up is because war is a part of nature. And before I continue to talk about the Civil War, you have to understand that war was here waged against the tribes that were here in the Americas. It's just how things go. Okay. So to come back to the Civil War, we want to talk about the guy who was leading the United States Corporation in the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, right? And Abraham Lincoln, I wanted to read something very specific. But he was the one who succeeded in preserving the Union. Okay, this is what I wanted to show you guys. He succeeded in preserving the Union, abolishing slavery, and bolstering the federal government and modernizing the U.S. economy. So what Abraham Lincoln is known for is the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the slaves, right? So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why this is actually a joke, and this baboon guy needs to not be, I guess you could say, exalted as put on a pedestal, basically, because first of all, remember the United States, it's a corporation. Period. You can go and look this up anywhere. Okay, but an emancipation, what it means is viewed in some jurisdiction as liberation of the bound individual from their duty to serve and obey their parents or owners. In others, it is considered a liberation of parent owner from their obligation to care for the bound individual. Emancipation is either explicit or implicit. Explicit emancipation occurs by court order and generally involves the liberating entity's declaration. Key word. I want you to keep that word in mind. Declaration before a notary public and other witnesses that they intend to set the bound individual free. Implicit emancipation does not require a court order or testimony to be valid, occurs when a minor marries, reaches the age of majority, etc., etc. But I want us to focus on this right here, the liberating entity's declaration. So if we're talking about an emancipation, and we'll go over here to civil rights too, because I wanted to talk about this, and this follows suit perfectly. But the Emancipation Proclamation, what proclamation means. So emancipation is to free from ownership, right? A proclamation is something that is proclaimed, specifically a formal public announcement. And look at the definition here. It says this action of proclaiming, the state of being proclaimed. So what this means is that essentially what I'm trying to say is that we were not freed by Abraham Lincoln. Slaves were not freed. In fact, going back to this definition here, it was a written declaration of trust. Anybody who knows anything about sovereignty or trust law, the Emancipation Proclamation was a declaration of trust, transferring the ownership of slaves from the individual to the state. Says it right here, the action of proclaiming the state of being proclaimed. Okay, the proclamation of martial law. Look at that. All right, so let's go over this civil rights, because this is what happened after 1865 or whenever the fuck Lincoln freed the slaves or declared emancipation, is that they introduced civil rights and civil liberties. So now I know that these are very controversial topics. I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of people are, don't talk about that. People are too emotional, especially the melanated people, and it's crazy because we don't know our history. We've really been bamboozled by these motherfucking people who whitewash the books. And it's like, they know that we're so ADHD that we're not going to go back and read the books. But I'm going to tell you right now, my brothers and sisters, is that we need to go back and read. Not only that, we got to go back and read much more than they books. We got to start to read our treaties that we signed with the United States. Because in Canada and in North America, the United States, they have been dishonoring them for the past few generations and still are currently. But it's beautiful. I've seen some of the people making peace, as you see here in I think they posted it the other day. Actually, I don't think it was them, but I think it might be on my story still. Nah, probably not. Let's see. Yeah, it is right here. We've come a long way, believe it or not. We have come a long way, for sure. But at the end of the day, even though this is taking place, we can't let that distract us from the reality and the truth. And the truth is that we need to get right with this stuff. We need to learn this. So I want to talk to you about civil rights and civil liberties. People often confuse civil rights and civil liberties. Civil rights refer to the legal provisions that stem from the notions of equality. Civil rights are not in the Bill of Rights, which is the Constitution. They deal with legal protections. For example, the right to vote is a civil right. A civil liberty, on the other hand, refers to a personal freedoms protected by the Bill of Rights. So check this out. After the Civil War, for example, it says it right here. The First Amendment's right to free speech is a civil liberty, right? So me coming on here and expressing my understanding about how I see this history is a civil right. It's a civil liberty, excuse me, not a civil right. It's a civil liberty. So it is my sovereign liberty under the Constitution, beyond the Constitution. Let's be real, because no fucking Constitution is gonna say that I even have the right to open my mouth and speak my truth. But at the end of the day, it is protected by the Constitution, right? So the Reconstruction era was the era following the Civil War. So the reason why I want you to understand this is because, man, it goes so deep, but we won't go that deep today, because I do want to get back to that. I do want to get back to that article, and I want to watch that video just so y'all can understand some stuff. But before we get there, the Reconstruction era was the period following the Civil War in which the federal government attempted to pass laws that aimed at helping victims of slavery, primarily African Americans. How the fuck does that make sense? So they're trying to help African Americans when they went to war with Aboriginals. So check this out. The Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, constituted the largest expansion of civil rights Look at this. It says it right here. They just told us the difference between civil rights and civil liberties. And they tell us that these three amendments constituted the largest expansion of civil rights, not civil liberties. They clearly just made the distinction in the above paragraph. It's crazy. People overlook the simple wording of the English language. In history of the United States, the 13th Amendment outlawed involuntary servitude. The 14th Amendment made it illegal for a state to pass laws which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States or deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, or deny to any person within his jurisdiction the equal protection of law. I want to bring up the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, and this will be the last thing that I'll talk about, and then we'll go into that video because it's important to notice. The 14th Amendment, after the 1800s, the 14th Amendment, it says here, Section 1, all person born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process. All right, let's just stop there. The 14th Amendment has a lot to do with the naturalization. See, it was ratified in 1868. It granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States. This was the issue. So after the Reconstruction period, the Civil War ending in 1865, in 1868, the Constitution was ratified to add the 14th Amendment to say that actually, now that every single state in the Americas is run by our corporation, we are going to give you civil rights. Civil rights under the 14th Amendment if you are naturalized under the United States government. And what that means is naturalization means that you obtain citizenship. And if you know anything about the definition of a citizen, it means to be property. It means to be a slave, basically a slave-based citizen, because you are property of a corporation. That's all it means. And when we get deeper into this channel, we'll talk more about how this naturalization process, the United States went bankrupt after the Civil War, and they had to pledge the equity. This is what it was really for. It was so that the Union the United States could take out a loan, basically with all of the humans or citizens backing their equity, their blood, sweat, and tears to basically back the corporation's debt. And we'll talk about that in the future. But for now, understand a lot that we spoke about is deep. All right. But to go back here, this shit almost brought me to tears, man. Check this video out.
215 children have been found in a mass grave in Canada. Tributes have appeared at the site on the grounds of a former residential school, British Columbia. It was set up to forcibly assimilate Indigenous people and operated for nearly 90 years until closing in 1978. These schools were across Canada. An investigation found many of the 150,000 children who attended them suffered from physical abuse, rape, and malnutrition.
Whew. Oh man, that shit makes me sick to my stomach. The remains of 215 children, some as young as 3 years old, have been found buried on the site of what was once Canada's largest Indigenous residential school, one of the institutions that held children taken from their families across the nation. Chief Roseanne Casimir of the Loops I don't even know, First Nation said in a news release that the remains were confirmed last weekend with the help of ground-penetrating radar. I think that's LIDAR. More bodies may be found because there are more areas to search on the school grounds. In an earlier release, she called the discovery an unthinkable loss that was spoken but never documented at the Kamloops Indian Reservation. From the 19th century until 1970s, more than 150,000 First Nation children were required to attend state-funded Christian schools as part of a program to assimilate them into Canadian society. They were forced to convert to Christianity and not allowed to speak their native languages. Many were beaten and verbally abused, and up to 6,000 are said to have died. That is false. There has been way more Indigenous children that have been murdered. Tongues were cut, heads were shaved, they were raped, they were killed, they were starved. It's sad what happened here. And the reality is that, being that this is coming up now, it's a good opportunity for people in the Canadian or Canada and in the United States to learn from this. Is that this is not new. Is that these governments, these churches, they don't care about us. They never did. It's been about 400, 500 years before they really stopped respecting us. After the Civil War, it was a wrap. The American corporation took control of everything. Same thing that what happened in Canada. The Union took control of them too. And look what they did. They put them in reservations. They put them in schools, cut their tongues out, shaved their heads, raped them. And now didn't even have the audacity to give them proper burials. To me, this ain't humane. This is the largest massacres here in the history of the United States. But nobody talks about it. So I wanted to do the due diligence, man, just because I was really feeling the weight of this story, man. It said that a report more than 5 years ago said at least 3,200 children had died amid abuse and neglect. And it said it had reports of at least 51 deaths at the Kamloops School alone between 1915 and 1963, my friends. That was less than 100 years ago, or 100 years ago or so. And what you think is about to happen now? History is repeating itself. They still killing us. They still got us in chains. They still got us in bondage, but in different ways. And this is why learning the law and enforcing the law and knowing the treaties are so important. Man, it's sad. Baby shoes. Horrified and heartbroken to learn of the discovery. British Columbia Premier John Horgan. I don't know, I'm not even going to go into a loophole of who that is because it probably doesn't even matter. Given the size of the school, with up to 500 students registered and attending at one time, we understand the confirmed loss of effective First Nation communities across British Columbia and beyond. The authority's CEO, Richard Jock, said the discovery illustrates the damaging and lasting impacts that the residential school system continues to have on the First Nation people, their families, and communities. Nicole Shabbos, a law professor at Thompson Rivers University, said each of her first-year law students at the Kamloops University spends at least one day at the formal residential school speaking with survivors about conditions they had endured. She said that did not hear survivors talk about any unmarked grave area, but they all talk about the kids who didn't make it. Damn. Man, so that's it for me today, family. I just want to share some perspective about the history here in the Americas. We'll continue to do this, but we'll also talk about more solutions. Wholeness and love, family. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.